I can't remember falling asleep. One moment, there was nothing but nothing. Then I woke on cold concrete. My shoulders ached, my head throbbed. Above me, a single fluorescent bulb pulsed on and off, casting long hunting shadows across damp walls. Water dripped somewhere to my left, each drop echoing like a distant footstep. I tried to sit up, but my arms trembled. My fingers scraped the floor. I tasted dust in the back of my throat. My mouth was dry. I swallowed hard, hoping to find a clue, anything, but only silence met me. I spoke my name aloud. My name is... My voice came out thin, distant, as if I were reciting words from far away. I swallowed again. My name is... Nothing. The pause stretched until I felt the walls closing in. I blinked at the ceiling. Gray paint peeled in curling strips. A stray rat scuttled past, disappearing behind a pile of broken crates. My heart surged in panic, and I tried to shout, but only a feeble whisper escaped. I sounded like a ghost. Dragging myself to my feet, I realized my clothes were torn and stiff with grime. My jacket sleeve was frayed. My jeans clung to my skin where mud had caked. I shivered, though the air felt stale rather than cold. Tiny pebbles crunched under my shoes as I took my first unsteady steps. My head spun with each movement, and I reached out to steady myself against the wall. It felt damp and alive, slick with something that might have been water or something darker. The hallway stretched in both directions, disappearing into shadow. I dared to speak again. Hello? The word floated into the gloom and died. My heart pounded louder than the dripping rhythm behind me. I swallowed past a lump in my throat. My pulse thundered in my ears. A low hum of electricity vibrated through the light above, and then it stuttered and died. Darkness clawed in from the corners. My breath came shallow and fast. I fumbled for a switch beside the door frame, but the box was empty, wires nicked and sparking. No switch, no help. I took a trembling step forward. My palm brushed against cold metal. A door. I pressed my ear to it. Behind it, a faint thrum of ventilation. Or was it a machine? I knocked once, then twice. The hollow sound mocked me. I twisted the handle. It held firm. I gripped it with both hands and pulled. The door gave way with a groan. I slipped inside and flicked on the flashlight app on my phone, if it still worked. The screen blinked to life, casting a narrow beam that trembled with my hand. The room was small and bare. A desk lay toppled in one corner, its drawers torn open and papers strewn across the floor. A metal filing cabinet stood against the far wall, doors hanging open. I shone the light over the mess. Old memos, yellowed and brittle, littered the floor. My shoes crunched over a drafty blueprint that showed a layout of rooms. This place, wherever it was. I crouched to read the scrawl. Lower level, maintenance wing. Maintenance wing. My mind seized on the words like a lifeline. I pressed home on my phone's keyboard, hoping to reach someone, anyone. A dial tone buzzed in my ear. My finger trembled as I tapped numbers at random. No service. I stared at the screen, heart sinking. I tried to swipe to contacts. It was empty. No names. No numbers. Nothing. Just a blank list, as if I'd never saved a single detail of my life. A wave of dread crashed over me. Who was I? Who had I been? I rose and swept the light across the room again. In the corner, a rat's tail flickered into view before it darted behind a stack of boxes. The beam caught a single word stenciled on the wall in peeling paint. Authorized personnel only. I swallowed. I was not authorized. I was not supposed to be here. Yet here I was, wandering through empty corridors, unseen, unheard, except by the walls that mocked my solitude. The corridor beyond was almost pitch black. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. My legs shook, but I forced myself forward. Each footfall echoed, my own ghostly echo. My voice trembled as I muttered, "I have to find someone." The words felt foreign on my tongue, as if I had swallowed them whole. I reached the hallway's end and found another door. This one had a small window, cracked and smeared with grime. I peered through. A large room beyond lay cluttered with abandoned machinery and coiled hoses. In the center, a long table like an operating table, its surface stained with rust. The flashlight trembled in my hand, illuminating nothing but shadows that seemed to shift and twist. My pulse thundered so loudly I was certain it would drown out any sound. For a moment, I froze, then something moved behind the table. A shape. I raised the beam. Nothing. But I heard a soft sigh. My breath caught in my chest. I swallowed. Hello? The word was a stranger again. Silence. A breeze, cold and foul, brushed the back of my neck. I spun. Empty space. My flashlight flickered. The bulb warped. Black spots danced before my eyes. Then the beam steadied, and I realized with a sudden suffocating horror that I was utterly alone, yet watched. I took another step and the door slammed behind me. My heart leapt into my throat. I spun toward it, lunged at the handle. It would not budge. Panic clawed at my throat. I pounded the wood with both fists. "Let me out!" My voice came as a rasp. I stepped back, deflated. The darkness pressed in. The table's rust stains gleamed. The machines creaked. The air grew heavier. I sank to my knees, pressing my back to the door. My flashlight slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Its beam flashed one last time, then went dark. I knelt there, my breath ragged, listening to the drip-drip of water and the hum of the building settling around me. My name was lost. My past was gone. And if I was here, alive or dead, I was not welcome. I closed my eyes and whispered, "What happened to me?" No answer came, only my own hollow echo. I forced myself to stand, every muscle protesting. My legs felt like wet noodles, but there was no choice. The door behind me wouldn't budge, so I turned my back to it and edged along the wall until I found another exit. The handle was cold, slick with condensation, and it turned easily, too easily. The door swung inward on rusty hinges. A narrow hallway stretched before me. The beam of my fallen flashlight lay dead on the grimy floor, so I fumbled in my pocket for my phone. My fingers closed around it, but the screen remained stubbornly black. No battery, no light, no signal. I took a steadying breath and moved forward by memory of the floor plan. I counted doors as I passed, 4 on the left, 3 on the right. Names stamped on metal placards faded beyond legibility. Somewhere beyond these walls, a stairwell or an exit sign had to exist. I wiped sweat from my brow, though the air was dank and unmoving. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then, at the end of the hall, I saw a faint glow, a sliver of natural light seeping in under a door. Hope surged. I hurried toward it and pressed my ear to the wood. Footsteps, a slow, deliberate shuffle, echoed somewhere beyond. A heartbeat later, a hand wrapped around the knob and turned. The door swung open. A man in a fluorescent vest stood there, leaning on a mop. His face was half hidden by a baseball cap, shadowed and unreadable. He stared at me, eyes widening. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me," my voice cracked. He jumped back, eyes darting over me like I was a ghost come to life. He dropped the mop with a clatter and backed away, knocking over an empty bucket that spilled dirty water onto the cracked tiles. He made no sound but pointed at me with trembling fingers and backed into the room behind him. "Hey," I called, but my words were swallowed by the sudden slam of the door. Darkness rushed in. I pounded on the door. "Wait, please!" My fist stung against the wood. There was no answer. My heart sank with the realization that this man had seen me and fled in terror. He had treated me like a monster. I spun the knob. Locked. I backed away, chest heaving. If the janitor ran, what hope did I have of finding someone who could help? Or would everyone react the same? I forced myself to calm down. I counted to 10, inhaling through my nose, exhaling through my mouth. Then I circled back to the bucket, scooped up the muddy water, and splashed my face. The cold shock reminded me I was alive, or at least flesh and blood. My reflection would have been in the rippling surface, but I saw nothing. Turning, I heard movement behind another door down the hall. I hurried toward it, mind racing. Maybe this person would be different. Maybe this one would answer. The handle rattled as I reached out to twist it. The door swung wide into a storage closet. Boxes of supplies lined the shelves. Cleaning rags, light bulbs, spare faucets. No person. I stepped inside, peering into the shadows, my breath loud. Nothing moved. I flicked my wrist, hoping to find some light switch hidden among the boxes, but my hand passed over bare wall. I swallowed and backed out. No help here either. A soft hiss drew my attention. The janitor's door, still ajar, let out a low stream of air through its gap. I seized the handle and pulled. The door resisted, then gave way with a wrenching groan. I pushed inside. The janitor lay on the floor, curled in a ball, the vest tossed to one side. His eyes were wide with terror, fixed on something behind me. My breath caught. I turned. There was nothing there. No figure, no monster, no ghost. Just the storage closet beyond and the dim corridor. I took a step forward. He whimpered. Don't come closer," he choked, voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. "It's okay," I said, hands raised. "I'm not going to hurt you." My voice felt hollow. Even to me, it sounded like the echo of a memory, tinny and distant. He shook his head. You can't." He scrambled away, bumping into shelves. Cans of cleaning solution rattled. He kicked them aside as he crawled, looking back over his shoulder as though something was right behind me, waiting. My heart thundered. "Please," I whispered. "Tell me what's wrong." He didn't answer. He bolted for the door, into the corridor, and I gave chase, screaming, "Wait! Please!" I reached the hallway just in time to see him round the corner and disappear. No footsteps echoed. No sign of him. The hallway was empty. Only the hum of old ventilation filled the silence. I sank to the floor, pressing my back against the cold wall. My phone was dead. The toolbox of my mind was empty. I had no name, no past, no purpose, only the desperate need to know why strangers recoiled from me like I was something unholy. I looked down at my hands, pale in the half-light. I flexed my fingers, willing them to be my witnesses. They were mine, surely. My hands should belong to someone, somebody who once had a name. But now, the ghost inside me saw only flesh, only bone, only the thing I had become. The door to the janitor's room groaned behind me. The frame rattled, a shadow passed. I bolted upright, my pulse thundered. I flicked my eyes to the gap, but no one was there. I closed my eyes and listened. The building breathed around me. Pipes sighed. Far off, a metal door banged. The echo rolled down the halls. I whispered, "I'm not a ghost," even though I didn't know if it was true. No answer came. Only my own ragged breath. I pressed my hand to the wall, feeling its cold solidity. It was real. I was real. And yet, I wasn't. Pulling myself to my feet, I brushed dust from my jeans. I said aloud, "I need to find out who I am." My voice, though distant in my ears, felt like a vow. Moving with renewed purpose, I slid my palm against the wall, following the corridor deeper into the building. The faint glow of emergency lights up ahead promised an exit, or at least another clue. My heart pounded in time with my steps. 1, 2, 1, 2. Alive, alive, alive. Or so I prayed. The emergency lights cast a sickly red glow as I followed the corridor's curve, heart hammering in my chest. At the end, a stairwell door stood slightly ajar. The metal frame was scratched, the paint chipped from years of use. I pushed it open and crept inside, each step echoing as I ascended. The stairs felt solid under my feet, no wobble, no give. And yet, with every footfall, I wondered if I truly belonged here. One flight up, I found myself in another hallway, this one wider and lined with windows. Through their grime-coated glass, I could see the midday sun hanging low in a gray sky. Relief flooded me. Outside, I might find someone who could help. I moved toward the far end, muscles stiff from crouching and crawling through labyrinthine corridors. My breath came in ragged gasps. I pushed open the nearest windowed door and tumbled out into a parking garage. The stale air smelled of oil and concrete. Rows of abandoned cars sat like tombstones, their engines long cold. I stood in the center, arms outstretched, and took in the echoing emptiness. No one. Silence. Then I heard it. The distant rumble of traffic, muffled but unmistakable. I hurried up the ramp and spilled out into the street. A few cars passed by, their drivers' eyes glued to the road, oblivious. I stepped fully into the sidewalk and stood, blinking as if waking from a dream. The city stretched around me, tall buildings of glass and steel, street vendors calling out, the low hum of life continuing without pause. I raised a hand and waved at the first person I saw, a woman carrying a stack of cardboard boxes. She paused, stared at me for a heartbeat, then dropped her load and sprinted away, boxes scattering like paper birds. I called after her, "Wait, please!" But my voice carried no force. It was swallowed by the ambient noise of car horns and distant chatter. I ran after her, weaving through startled pedestrians, but she was gone around the corner. My chest burned. I slowed to a walk and pressed fingers to my throat, still tasting dust. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out and tried to power it on. Nothing. Blank screen. I punched the power button again and again. No life. No signal. No contacts. I slid down a lamppost, letting my legs give out beneath me. My head nodded forward. I rubbed my eyes. Nothing was familiar. Not the street names, not the advertisements plastered across neon signs, not the faces that turned away in fear. Who was I? Where did I come from? My memories had the solidity of smoke, slipping through my fingers whenever I tried to grasp them. I pulled my knees to my chest. I whispered into the wind, "Someone has to see me." The words felt desperate, like a plea carved into stone. I scanned the crowd, people moving in their own worlds, eyes on phones, bags, destinations. I stepped forward and reached out to tap a man's shoulder. He wore a suit and carried a briefcase. "Excuse me," I said, lifting my hand. "Can you help me?" He threw up his hands and backed away so fast his own momentum sent him stumbling sideways into a lamppost. His briefcase clattered to the ground. He scrambled onto his feet, spun on his heel, and ran. The crowd parted around me like the sea, leaving a widening circle of silence in my wake. Fear coiled in my gut. I didn't want to scare anyone, but every movement felt wrong, as if I were the source of a silent alarm. I looked down at my own hands, two pale, trembling hands, and flexed them, willing them to show I was flesh and blood. I slammed my fist into my palm. The sting was real. Pain should be the proof of life, but it did nothing to dispel the terror. I stood and dusted mud from my jeans. The city roared around me. Somewhere ahead was a cafe. I spotted its green awning and the soft glow of hanging lights inside. Desperation propelled me forward. Maybe there I could find someone not so frightened. I approached the glass door and hesitated. The brass handle was cold under my palm. I inhaled and pushed inside. Warm air and the scent of fresh coffee enveloped me. The cafe was nearly empty. Two lone patrons seated at separate tables, heads bent over laptops. A barista stood behind the counter, cleaning a glass with a towel. I felt a flicker of hope. I strode across the checkered tile floor and stopped before the counter. "Please," I said, voice catching. "I need your help. Can you hear me?" I leaned forward, trying to catch her eye. She froze, rag in midair. Her face paled and the towel slipped from her hand. She stared at me for a long moment, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open, then blinked. Her gaze shifted past me to the empty doorway behind. I followed her line of sight. Nothing. No one. No ghostly figure trailing me. I turned back to her. "Are you all right?" I asked. My heart pounded so loud I was certain she could hear it. She swallowed hard and pointed at me. You look real," she stammered, "but I can't hear you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She gestured toward her ear, confusion creasing her brow. I see you moving your lips, but there's no sound." My pulse spiked. I opened my mouth. Nothing. I whispered, "Try listening." Her eyes darted around. There's silence. Her voice trembled as if she spoke to herself more than to me. "You're alive, I think. Your chest is moving, but no sound." I sank into the chair opposite her, hands gripping the edge. My mind raced. Some people couldn't hear me. Others ran away. The barista's reaction, seeing but not hearing, was new. For a moment, I thought I had found someone willing to listen, even if she literally couldn't. I rubbed my temples. "I can't hear myself." I admitted, my voice, it's gone. Or maybe it was never here. She leaned around the counter and sat on a stool. I can't explain it." She tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. "Some of us can see you, but there's never any sound. It's like watching a silent film." My throat closed. A silent film. Me, a ghost in a world of echoes. I pressed both palms to the table's edge. "What do I do?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know." She glanced at the empty cafe. Maybe find someone who can both see and hear you?" I nodded, as if obeying an order. Yes, that's it." I rose, voice silent in my own ears. I crossed the cafe and paused at the door, turning back to her. I raised my hand in a silent wave. She returned it, her eyes sad. "Good luck," she mouthed without sound. Outside, the city's bustle crashed in. I walked away with purpose, scanning faces, searching for someone who might bridge the divide between silence and sight. I didn't know where I was headed, but I had found a foothold in the void. Somewhere, someone, out there, might truly hear me. And I would find them, or die trying. I stepped off the curb and hailed the first taxi I saw. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, frowned, then turned back to the steering wheel without a word. I gave him an address scrawled on a scrap of paper, an anonymous recommendation from the barista, and we rattled through unfamiliar streets until he pulled up in front of a low-slung building with a flickering neon sign. Cheap Sleep Motel. Inside, the lobby smelled of stale cigarette smoke and musty carpet. A bored clerk glanced up, stamped a receipt, and slid me a thin metal key labeled Room 12. I nodded, paid in cash I didn't remember earning, and headed down the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My footsteps echoed as I passed doors with peeling paint and cracked locks. Room 12 stood at the far end. I fumbled with the key, inserted it, and twisted. The door swung open to reveal a small space, a single bed with a stained blanket, a nightstand, and a worn-out armchair sagging in the corner. A half-empty minibar hummed quietly, its contents rattling inside like trapped insects. The air smelled of disinfectant and decay. I dropped my jacket on the foot of the bed and set my phone, still dead, on the nightstand. I ran my fingers along the edge of the mattress. It felt lumpy, as though something hard was buried beneath the fabric. I hesitated, then peeled back the blanket, nothing but coils of spring. I let the blanket drop back down with a sigh. My eyes scanned the room. The pattern of water stains on the ceiling, the crack in the headboard, the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling by a frayed cord. I walked to the window and peered through the dusty glass. The street lamps outside cast long, tremulous shadows. Beyond them, I saw the vague shapes of parked cars and the indistinct outlines of buildings, but no people. I leaned against the sill and closed my eyes. My reflection should be there, but I saw only darkness. My pulse skipped. I pushed off and faced the mirror above the dresser. The frame was ornate, too fancy for this crummy place, gilded in chipped gold paint. I took a hesitant step forward. Nothing. No image stared back at me. The mirror was as blank as glass into empty air. My heart pounded so fiercely I felt it in my throat. I reached out and touched the surface. The glass was cool under my fingertips, smooth, whole, but it didn't hold me. It swallowed my outline. I wrapped my arms around myself, cold despite the oppressive heat of the room. I whispered, "I'm here." My lips moved, but there was nothing to hear. I leaned closer to the mirror, searching for a flicker of recognition, a hint of flesh on glass. The reflection stayed empty, a void framed in gold. I stumbled back and sat on the edge of the bed, breathing hard. Sweat beaded at my hairline. I pressed my palms to my temples, willing my memory to surface. A voice in my head urged me to remember who I was, my name, my life, my death. But only shadows and half-glimpsed images swirled there, like ghosts reluctant to speak. I stood and rummaged through my pockets. Coins, lint, a faded ticket stub from somewhere I didn't know. I laid them out on the nightstand as though their arrangement might unlock a memory. None did. I craned my neck, catching sight of the minibar's glowing red light. Maybe something cold to drink would steady me. I lifted the handle and peered inside. Rows of soda cans and bottled water waited behind the glass. I pressed the button beneath a water bottle and heard the mechanical clunk as it dropped. I pulled it out, twisted off the cap, and drank deeply until the cold liquid stung my throat. I swallowed hard, tasting plastic and foam, proof at least that I could still feel. I set the bottle down and sank back into the armchair. My back pressed against the worn fabric, and I rubbed my eyes. For a moment, I imagined the barista's kind face, her silent sympathy in the cafe. I yearned for that calm, but the memory slipped away like smoke. All I had left was this empty room and a blank reflection. The silence pressed against my ears, filling the space where my voice should have been. I listened to my own breathing, slow and steady, reminding myself that I was alive, even if no mirror could confirm it. I whispered to the empty space, "I will find myself." Then I noticed a small crack in the plaster above the bed. It was thin, no wider than a hairline, but it split the wall like a scar. I stood and lit the lone lamp on the nightstand. Its bulb flickered, casting dancing patterns against the wallpaper. I moved toward the crack and traced its path with my fingertip. The plaster crumbled under my touch, and a trickle of dust fell onto the bed. I knelt and brushed away the debris, revealing a faded symbol etched into the wall, a circle bisected by a diagonal line. It felt both familiar and alien, like the memory of a word I had forgotten. I pressed my palm to the etching, fingertips tracing its curves. A shiver ran up my arm. The room seemed to tilt, the lamp's light pulsating. My breath caught. I closed my eyes, and a single phrase flickered in my mind. "Only the living leave a mark." My eyes snapped open. The room was still. The mirror stayed blank. The symbol glowed faintly beneath my palm, a silent promise or a warning. I rose and switched off the lamp, plunging the room back into half light. I exhaled and paced the narrow space, the tiled floor cool under my feet. Somewhere outside, a car alarm wailed, and I jumped, heart racing. I paused at the door, hand on the handle. I shook my head as if to clear the fog. I had come here seeking answers, some sign that I was real. Instead, I found only emptiness, an empty reflection, a vacant name, a silent room. But I had found the symbol. I had felt its power beneath my fingertips. And if it meant anything, if it truly was a clue to my existence, then I would follow it wherever it led. With that vow burning inside me, I stepped back into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. The neon sign flickered through the grimy window of room 12, a beacon in the gloom. I took a deep breath and walked away, determined to bring my own shadow back to life. I pushed through the motel's chipped glass door and felt the humid night air wrap around me like a damp blanket. The neon sign buzzed overhead, sputtering red light across the empty parking lot. My reflection should have glowed back at me in the glass, but all I saw was darkness. I blinked and shook my head. There were no mirrors here. No reflections. Only the nights I couldn't remember. I rummaged in my pocket for the crumpled ticket stub, the only clue I'd found in room 12. My fingers closed around its jagged edge. I flattened it against the palm of my hand and held it up under the flickering lamp. The date printed on the stub was 6 nights ago, and the name of the place was Bella Verde Cafe. I turned it over, no other details. I stashed it back in my pocket and let my feet carry me toward the address. The city street was lined with closed shops and shuttered windows. A stray cat slinked across the sidewalk. I followed the tickets thread in my mind, picturing the woman I'd seen once, just once, smiling across a small table with warm light dancing in her eyes. Her name floated on the edges of my memory, but whenever I reached for it, it slipped away. I found Bella Verde halfway down the block, its green and white awning folded for the night. Through the glass, I could see overturned chairs and an empty counter. The bell above the door was broken off its hook. I tried the handle. It was locked. There was no way in. I circled the building's perimeter, looking for a back entrance. A narrow alley ran alongside the cafe, littered with cardboard boxes and empty takeout containers. Graffiti covered the brick walls, jagged letters and curious symbols I didn't understand. The alley ended at a rusted metal door. I pressed my palm against it and pushed. It swung open with a groan. Inside was a tiny storage room. Shelves of cleaning supplies, a stack of folded tablecloths, and a single mop bucket in the corner. I stepped in, heart pounding, and let the door close behind me. The dark swallowed me whole. I fumbled along the wall until I found a light switch. The bulb overhead snapped on with a harsh buzz, revealing a narrow hallway beyond. The air smelled of stale coffee and damp fabric. I crept forward, the beam of my phone's dark screen useless, so I whispered into the silence, "Is anyone here?" No answer. My voice felt louder than it should, reverberating down the corridor in a mocking echo. I rounded a corner, then froze. A single chair sat under a spotlight at the end of the hall. On it was a photograph, face down. I stepped closer and picked it up. Turning it over, I saw myself, only I looked different, cleaner, healthier, with a smile that lit my eyes. And beside me was the woman, dark hair pulled back, wearing a simple dress, her hand resting on mine. She was looking at me like I was the only thing in the world worth seeing. My breath caught, my chest tightened. I studied her face, memorizing every curve of her lips, every glint in her eyes. Intuition told me I knew her. Knew her more deeply than anyone I'd ever met. But her name still slipped away. I pocketed the photograph and stumbled back to the storage room's light switch, extinguishing the glow. The hallway dissolved into black. I heard a soft click behind me and spun around, but the door was gone. A solid wall stood in its place, bricks and mortar where the door frame should have been. Panic rose in my throat and I pounded on the wall. No, this isn't real. The bricks echoed under my fists. My palms stung. I pressed my ear to the cold surface. Nothing but silence. My heart pounded in my ears. I backed away and ran my hands over the wall until I felt a slight indentation, a hidden latch. I thumbed it, and a section of brick slid inward, revealing a narrow crawl space. I crawled through on my knees, breath shallow, hands scraping against rough stone, until I emerged in the cafe's main dining area. Tables were flipped on their sides, chairs stacked in corners, and the barista's counter lay overturned, at its drawers yanked out and strewn across the floor. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting jagged shadows through the front windows. I hurried to the counter and picked up one of the barista's mugs. It was cold and damp. I held it under the window, turning it in my hands, staring at the chipped paint on its rim. Words were etched there. Remember me. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers trembled as I wiped the date, 04/13/25. My mind flashed with a scene. A crowded cafe table, spring sunlight streaming through a stained glass window, the laughter of other patrons fading into the background as the woman reached for my hand, her voice asking softly, "Do you remember me?" The memory fractured. I saw a man arguing in a doorway, heard a scream, and felt the shock of cold tile under my cheek. Then blackness. I closed my eyes, fighting the tidal wave of images crashing through my mind. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor behind the counter. I pressed the photograph to my chest and whispered, "I do remember you." Tears welled in my eyes. I clenched my fists. "Who are you?" A sob built in my throat, but no sound came. I pressed the photograph into the crumbs and coffee grounds on the floor, as though returning it to sacred ground. After long moments, my breathing slowed. The cafe remained silent, abandoned. Yet something had shifted. The photograph felt warmer in my hand, like it carried a pulse. I slid it into my jacket pocket and rose to my feet. I walked to the front door and pulled on the handle. It gave way easily this time, swinging open onto the deserted street. I stepped out into the night, clutching the mug and photograph to my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket, once like an echo from another world. I pulled it out. The screen flickered on, bright and alive for a single second before dying again. In that flash, I saw a text message, "Meet me where we first met, 7 p.m. tonight." It was from an unknown number. My pulse surged. The address was the same as the motel. I looked at my watch, only to remember it too was a broken relic on my wrist, its hands frozen at 3:03. I swallowed past a wave of dread. Someone was reaching out to me, someone who still remembered. Tonight at 7 p.m. I would know more. Tonight, I would find out who I was, and I would face whatever waited. I arrived at Bella Verde Cafe at precisely 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before our mysterious rendezvous. The sidewalk glowed under street lamps, and the cafe's sign now flickered emerald and ivory. My heart thundered at the promise of answers. All day, I'd wrestled with fragments of memory. Her face, that photograph, the etched mug, yet nothing had felt more real than the gentle echo of her voice calling my name. I pushed the door open. A bell chimed overhead, though it sounded muted, like a distant echo in a cavern. Inside, warm light bathed polished wood counters and neatly arranged tables. The cafe was nearly empty, just one patron hunched over a laptop in the corner. The air carried the rich scent of roasted beans, cinnamon, and something sweeter, like vanilla sugar. Behind the counter stood the barista, her dark hair gathered in a loose bun, wearing a green apron stamped with the cafe's logo. She looked up as I appeared, and for a heartbeat I felt the pull of recognition, the tilt of her head, the crease of her brow, the kindness in her eyes. I swallowed. You're not supposed to be here." She tilted her head, brow furrowing in gentle confusion. "I got your message." She stepped forward, wiping her hands on a towel. "I think I know what's happening to you." My throat tightened. "You do?" She nodded and motioned to the counter. "Sit down. I'll get us something warm." With calm efficiency, she filled a kettle and lit the burner. Steam curled upward as water heated. I slid onto a stool. My reflection should have glowed back at me in the counter's dark surface, but once again I saw only shadow. I looked at her, desperate. "Who are you?" She poured boiling water over 2 mugs, one patterned with green leaves, the other plain white. "I'm Claire," she said, placing the mugs before me. "I worked here the night you disappeared, the night you died." I jerked upright, nearly dropping my photograph. My pulse spiked. "I died here?" My voice rasped in my ears, but I could feel the vibration of my vocal cords. Proof, at least, that sound existed somewhere. Claire slid onto the stool beside me. "I was closing up. You stayed behind, sat at that table near the window." She pointed toward the corner. I followed her gesture and saw a table exactly as she described, candle flickering in a glass holder. "I asked if you needed anything. You smiled and said you'd meet me later." I frowned. "Meet you?" My memory danced on the edge of something real. Laughter, sunlight, the warm press of her hand. She sipped her tea, eyes fixed on mine. "I left to get the last order from the kitchen. When I came back, you were slumped forward, head on the table. I shook you. No response. I called 911. Tears pricked my eyes. I don't remember." Claire reached out, touching my hand. Her skin was warm beneath my fingers. "I know. I've watched you ever since." She paused, measuring my reaction. Then she continued, "You've been stuck between worlds. Some people see you, like me and that other barista. Others hear you, like those echoes in the hallways, but most can't at all. You're here, yet not here." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. Why me? She took a steadying breath. You were a good man. You helped people. That night, someone tried to hurt you. You shielded someone else. You died saving a stranger. Your spirit lingered, confused, lost. She looked down at her teacup. I think you need to let go. I pulled my hand away gently, grappling with the truth. To die and remain, that was the reverse of haunting. I was the ghost, living among the living. Let go. How? Claire set her cup on the counter and stood. Come with me. She guided me through the cafe's swinging door into a back room, the same storage closet I'd crouched in before. But tonight, it felt different, peaceful, lit by a single lamp. In the center lay a small altar, a wooden box draped with a white cloth, candles arranged in a circle around it. Incense smoke curled through the air, carrying the scent of sandalwood and rose. A book lay open on top, pages filled with neat handwriting and symbols I didn't understand. Claire knelt beside it. This is my grandmother's, she said softly. She was a medium. I learned a few things from her. Tonight, we're going to help you cross over. My heart pounded. I don't know if I'm ready. She smiled with gentle certainty. You will never know until you try. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the etched mug. You drank from this that night. She placed it on the altar. The circle of candles flickered as if in recognition. Claire lit the candles one by one, her hands steady despite the candle flames flicker. Speak with me, she said, her voice a soft melody. Tell me what you feel. I closed my eyes and looked inward. Images drifted, laughter in sunlight, the stranger's terrified eyes, my own fear, the final jolt of pain when I fell. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I feel love, I whispered. I remember that. My lips moved, the sound traveling only in the space between us. She nodded. That love is what anchors you. You held on to it, refusing to let go. She opened the book and ran a finger down the page of symbols. Let's call them back, the living memories you hold so dear. Claire began to chant softly, her words rolling over me like a warm breeze. I strained to hear them, but they were just beyond my reach, a melody carried on another plane. The candles flickered wildly, shadows dancing across the walls. A low hum filled the room, vibrating in my bones. I knelt beside her, closing my eyes. I pictured her face, Claire's kind eyes that had opened a door for me, the stranger's face in the photograph, the warmth of that cafe table in spring sunlight. I whispered their names, one by one, sending the memories out into the circle of flames. As I spoke, the room's air grew heavy, charged with electricity. The altar glowed with a soft white light. I felt weightlessness creeping in, as if the bonds of my living body were loosening. A gentle pull reached for me from beyond the walls, like warm hands offering comfort. Claire's voice rose in pitch, urgency tinged in her tone. Let them go, and you will find peace. Her hand rested on my shoulder, grounding me. I hesitated, fear and hope warring in my chest. Then, with a deep breath, I whispered, I release you. I release myself. A rush of wind swept through the room. The candles blazed, then extinguished in unison. Silence fell, profound and welcoming. My knees gave way, and I sank to the floor, eyes closed, feeling myself dissolve into light. Claire knelt beside me, brushing my hair back from my face. Rest now, she whispered. You did it. I felt warmth, love, and a peace I'd never known. Then the light faded, and I drifted, free. I woke in the alley beside Bella Verde Cafe, the cool pavement pressing against my cheek. The night was quiet, too quiet. My body felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted, but my mind still spun with questions. The last thing I remembered was the white-hot glow of the altar, Claire's voice fading into silence as I let go. Now I lay here, not quite sure who I was, but oddly hopeful that I might finally become myself again. Gingerly, I pushed myself to a seated position. My head throbbed with the memory of release, but the pain was different now, more like a cracked shell, ready to reveal something inside. I ran my fingers through my hair, tasting the dampness of night air. A distant siren wailed, and I realized my shirt was damp with sweat. I sat still for a long moment, listening to my own breathing, counting each inhale and exhale. I was here. I existed. I stood and brushed dust from my jeans. Claire's words echoed in my mind. You held on to love. You release yourself. Love and release, two opposing forces that somehow aligned. I slipped a hand into my jacket pocket and drew out the photograph, still warm to the touch. The woman's face smiled back at me. I traced the curve of her lips with my thumb and whispered, "Who are you?" No answer came, but I felt a pulse beneath the paper, as if she were there beside me. I folded the photograph carefully and tucked it back into my pocket. It was time to piece together everything I'd collected so far. I rose and made my way back to the front of the cafe. The neon sign flickered off, leaving the street lamp to cast long silver shadows across the sidewalk. The door was locked again, and I pressed my palm to the glass, willing it to open. It stayed shut, as though it too respected the boundary between worlds. I stepped back, planning my next move. Claire's storage room, she'd said. It was my refuge when I needed answers. I scanned the alley until I found the side door. This time it creaked open without protest. Inside, the stale scent of coffee and old wood greeted me. I closed the door behind me and let my phone's flashlight guide me down the narrow hallway. The storage closet door stood before me, exactly as I remembered. Paint-chipped, hinges squeaking. I pushed inside and flicked on the lamp. The altar was gone. The space was empty. I ran my hands along the bare shelves and found, tucked in the back, Claire's grandmother's old notebook. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. I opened it to the first page, where careful cursive spelled out, "To guide the lost, remember the heart's true mark." My pulse quickened. Heart's true mark. I flipped through pages filled with rituals, sigils, and notes in the margins. Memory bridges, anchoring to love, crossing thresholds. But one page was dog-eared and folded over at the corner. I smoothed it out and read, "When light and shadow meet, the living and the lost can converse. Seek places that bind you, where you lived, where you loved, where you died." Places that bind me: Bella Verde Cafe, the motel room, the alley, and somewhere in the city, the place where I fell. The memory flashed: bright spring sun, laughter, a sudden crack of noise, the stranger's scream. Then cold tile, excruciating pain, and darkness. It had to be a location I'd known, and it was tied to her. I jotted notes on a scrap of paper: motel room 12, symbol on wall, only the living leave a mark. Bella Verde Cafe, photograph, mug, Claire's help, death site. Memory fragments, dates 04/13/25, text message 7 p.m. Book page, places that bind you. I folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket next to the photograph. My head ached, but clarity glimmered through the fog. I had to return to the place where I died. I had to stand at that threshold and reconcile both sides of myself, the living man I'd been and the ghost I'd become. As I turned to leave, a quiet voice behind me made me freeze. "You're doing well." Claire stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the lamp's glow. She held 2 mugs of tea. "I thought you might need this." Warmth spread through me as I accepted a mug. Steam curled between my hands. "Thank you," I whispered, though only I would hear it. She stepped inside and closed the door. "I wanted to give you these," she said, handing me a small keychain. It was a brass key attached to a ring of worn leather. "This belonged to you. I found it in your pocket the night I brought you here." I turned it over. The key was old, intricate, with the initials JW engraved on one side. My pulse surged. JW. That could be my name. I let the keychain dangle from my fingers and whispered, "JW." Claire nodded. I checked the motel registry. Room 12 was rented under Jonathan Wright. "You checked in 6 nights ago, then you never checked out." My breath caught. Jonathan Wright. The name felt right, like a garment cut just for me. I closed my eyes and said it again. Jonathan Wright. It rolled off my tongue, bringing a rush of half-remembered images. Yellow school bus, the smell of pine forests, a woman's laugh, moments of a life I had lost. Claire watched me, eyes soft. "Tonight's your chance. Find the place you fell. Use the key if you need to unlock doors no longer open to the living. But remember, this is your final crossing. Once you face it, there's no turning back." I gripped the keychain until my knuckles whitened. Outside, the city lights gleamed like distant stars. I raised my mug in a silent toast to memory, to love, and to the bound place where my life and death intersected. I took a long pull of the tea, its warmth anchoring me to the moment. Then I set the mug down, squared my shoulders, and faced Claire. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. "I'll find it." She reached out and brushed my arm. "You're not alone, Jonathan. I'll be waiting." I slipped the keychain into my jacket and opened the door. The alley welcomed me with cool night air. I looked up at the sky, stars hidden behind city haze, and whispered my name into the darkness. Jonathan Wright. It sounded like a promise. With every step toward the unknown, I felt myself reclaiming my story. The path was lit by memory and marked by love. Tonight I would cross the final threshold, and only then would I truly be free. Night air clung to my skin as I stepped off the street and stood before the tenement's iron gate. Its paint was flaking, rust creeping across the bars like a slow bruise. This was the place, the location from my fractured memory, the scene of my final moments. My heart thundered as I fitted the brass key into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click, as if waking from a long sleep. The gate groaned open, revealing a narrow courtyard strewn with broken glass and weeds pushing through cracked concrete. A single bulb above the stairwell flickered weakly, casting more shadow than light. I swallowed hard and walked forward, each footstep echoing against the stone walls. The air smelled of mildew and something metallic, blood perhaps from my own unseen wound. I found the lobby door ajar. Wood splintered around the frame, gouged by some long-past violence. Beyond lay a dim hallway, walls scarred with graffiti and peeling wallpaper. I pressed my palm against the cold plaster, feeling the vibrations of my own pulse. This place held the key to everything. Up the stairs I climbed, counting each step as if chanting a mantra. 1, 2, 3. The stairwell spiraled upward, the rail rattling beneath my gloved fingers. After 3 flights, I reached the landing where the hallway forked. Apartment doors lined each side, numbers scrawled in faded brass. I remembered room 314. I headed right, heart pounding with every number. 310, 311, 312, then 313. Next to it, the door marked 314 loomed before me, its knocker missing and a smear of dark stain across its surface. My breath caught. The stain looked fresh, as though the walls themselves remembered the final moments of my life. I raised my hand and touched the door, expecting resistance, but the surface was smooth and cold beneath my fingertips. Taking a steadying breath, I turned the key. The lock clicked open. I pushed the door. It swung inward on decayed hinges, revealing a room swallowed by darkness. I flicked on my phone's flashlight, its beam slicing through the black to reveal a living room frozen in time. A toppled chair, a shattered picture frame, and in the corner, a sofa stained with a dark, spreading pool. My heart seized. The pool was too precise, rounded like a wound, as if the floor itself had bled. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam danced across the room, illuminating a small table by the window. On it lay a set of keys, car keys, house keys, a single silver locket etched with the initials JW. My initials. I knelt and picked up the locket, fingertips brushing its cool surface. I opened it. Inside was a faded photograph. Me in a crisp shirt, smiling under afternoon sunlight, the woman from my memory leaning close beside me. Her eyes glowed with love and mine shone with unbridled joy. A caption scrawled in pen read, "Jonathan and Emily, April 13th, 2025. My breath caught in my throat. April 13th. The date matched the cafe mug. My knuckles whitened around the locket. Emily. Her name was Emily. My Emily. I closed the locket and pressed it to my chest. Memories crashed through me. Laughter in a sunlit park, her hand warm in mine, the sudden shout of someone in the distance, the jolt of pain as I pushed her back, then darkness. I rose, blood pounding in my ears. My pulse felt like a drum roll as I surveyed the room. The pool on the sofa, my final resting place. I approached it, each step heavier than the last. The sofa's fabric was torn, evil and silent, but no grace remained in death. I knelt and placed my hand in the stain. A cold shock rattled my bones, but I did not flinch. "I'm here," I whispered, voice echoing in the hollow space. I remember. A faint breeze stirred the curtains. The window glass rattled against the frame. My chest tightened as the room seemed to exhale, its very walls awakening with recognition. The air grew thick, charged with something more than electricity. I closed my eyes and let the memories flood in. I saw Emily screaming as a stranger lunged at her, a flash of metal, the impact that sent me reeling backward. I saw her collapse, eyes wide with horror, my vision narrowing as life slipped away. And then darkness, until Claire's ringing words drew me back. Tears blurred my sight. I pressed my forehead against the locket, feeling her warmth through its metal. "Emily," I breathed. "I'm so sorry." A soft creak behind me drew my attention. I turned, flashlight beam dancing over the walls. Shadows flickered in the corners. Then I saw her silhouette, slender, ethereal, bathed in moonlight streaming through the window. Emily stood by the doorway, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes glistening with tears. I froze. My breath caught. "Emily?" My voice cracked, but I felt its vibration, life's echo. She took a step toward me. Her movement was fluid, ghostly, but unmistakably her. "Jonathan," she whispered, voice soft as wind through autumn leaves. "You came back." My heart thundered. I stood and crossed the room in 2 strides, falling to my knees before her. "I needed to remember," I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I had to know why I stayed." She nodded, eyes glimmering. "You stayed for me." She reached out, hand passing through my shoulder, cold but comforting. A jolt of sorrow pierced me, knowing our hands could not truly touch. "You saved me," she said, voice trembling. "This place, it's where you gave your life to save mine." I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her words anchor me. "I forgive myself," I whispered. "And I forgive you." Her form grew brighter, the moonlight haloing her like dawn. The room trembled, dust drifting from the ceiling. I rose, locket clenched in my hand, feeling a warmth spread from my chest outward in gentle waves. The stain on the sofa faded into the fabric, as if the sorrow of that night was finally washed clean. Emily's silhouette moved closer, the air around her shimmering. She smiled, a smile filled with love, relief, and longing. "Go, Jonathan," she said, voice echoing in the stillness. "Find your peace." I nodded, tears streaming, though my eyes felt clear and focused. With one last look at the room where I died and died again, I turned and walked toward the door. The key in my pocket glowed softly, guiding me back through the hallway. As I descended the stairs, the building seemed to sigh with release. Each step felt lighter, as though I shed a layer of sorrow. At the bottom, the courtyard gate stood open, moonlight pooling on the ground beyond. I stepped through into the night air. The city lay silent around me, but in my chest, my heart beat strong and alive. I touched the locket one last time, then tucked it away. "Goodbye, Emily," I whispered. A soft breeze stirred the courtyard weeds, carrying a single whispered word, "Goodbye." I walked away from the tenement, into the quiet streets, toward whatever awaited me beyond this world, ready at last to cross over, at peace with both my life and my death. I walked in silence, the city unfolding around me like the pages of a book I had forgotten how to read. The street lamps hummed above, their golden halos casting blurred light across the sidewalk. The night no longer felt hostile. No eyes hiding in the shadows, no distorted reflections, only a strange stillness, like the world itself was holding its breath. My name was Jonathan Wright. I had died saving the woman I loved, and now I was walking toward the end. As I passed a storefront window, instinct pulled my gaze to the glass, where once there had been nothing, no reflection, no trace of me. There was now something faint like breath on a mirror, a shimmer, a suggestion of form. I reached toward the surface and watched my fingers disappear into the light. I smiled. I was beginning to come back, or maybe I was finally learning how to leave. The locket in my pocket felt warm again. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Not mine, but hers. Emily's. That warmth had anchored me through every step, and now it was pushing me gently towards something new. I found myself at the edge of a park. Trees whispered in the wind, their leaves rustling like pages turning in some ancient script. A path curved inward, framed by iron arches wrapped in vines. I walked through and was met by the scent of damp earth and lilacs. Halfway down the trail, I saw the bench. The same bench from the photo. The same bench where we had first met. She was already there. Emily. She sat in the same posture as that day, back straight, legs crossed, hair brushing her shoulders. The way her hands were folded in her lap made my chest ache with recognition. She was waiting. But this time, she wasn't a shadow or a fading memory. She was fully present, more radiant than I'd ever seen her. She looked up as I approached, and her smile was not sad. "Hey," I said. My voice was steady, but my legs felt like they'd been carved from mist. She patted the bench beside her. "Took you long enough." I sat, barely breathing. "Am I? Alive?" Emily shook her head gently. "Not quite, not anymore, but you're closer to peace now than you've ever been." She reached over and took my hand. This time I felt it, her fingers interlaced with mine. Real, warm, whole. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Everything I had been, everything I had forgotten, every scream in the hallway and whisper through the mirror, it all led to this moment. "I've been here," she said softly, "waiting for you to remember. To choose." "Choose?" I asked. She turned toward me. Her eyes glistened, but there was no sorrow in them. "You can stay, Jonathan. Stay as you are, between the living and the gone. Linger in memory, drift through places that held meaning. Or, she squeezed my hand, you can come with me. My breath hitched. To the other side? She nodded. It's not the end. It's a beginning. Just not one you could have imagined. I looked down at our joined hands. The locket pulsed between us, steady and soft. I'm afraid, I whispered. I know, she said. But there's nothing left here to haunt. You've made peace. You saved me, and you remembered who you were. That's more than most ever do. I looked up at the night sky. Clouds drifted slowly across a sea of stars. The breeze carried the scent of lilac and wood smoke. For the first time, the world felt complete. I turned to her. Will I remember you? On the other side? Her smile grew. You'll remember everything. We stood together. She extended her hand toward the shadows beyond the path. Then let's go. I hesitated, looked back once. The city stood behind me, its lights twinkling like eyes finally closing for rest. Somewhere, Claire was sipping tea in the empty cafe. Somewhere, room 12 stood quiet and still. Somewhere, an old photograph sat framed beside a bed. All of it was real. All of it mattered. But my story here was finished. I took Emily's hand, and we walked into the dark. Not haunted, not haunting. Free. We stepped together into the dark, Emily's hand in mine, the world behind us softening like the end of a song. I didn't know what I expected beyond the park path. Perhaps blinding light, perhaps a door, a tunnel, or even a stairway. But there was none of that, just silence. Not the silence of death, but the silence of beginning, of breath held before a word is spoken. The trees around us faded, replaced by soft, shifting light. No sun, no stars, just an endless golden glow. It wrapped around us like warmth remembered from childhood, like the scent of home cooking drifting in from a room you haven't entered in years. Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hand in mine was the only anchor I needed. And as we walked, my thoughts quieted, not by force, but by peace. It was as if my mind had been full of static for so long that the absence of noise felt sacred. I glanced at her. Where are we? She smiled without looking at me. Some call it the other side. Others call it peace, eternity, the in-between. It's not really a place, Jonathan. It's a remembering. A remembering? She nodded. Of everything, not just your life, but every moment you touched the world and every way the world touched you back. Ahead, the light shifted into a gentle stream of color, rippling bands of memory. As we passed, I saw them clearly. My father teaching me how to ride a bike, my mother brushing my hair from my eyes as I lay in bed, the first book I ever loved, the first friend I lost, my first heartbreak, the laughter of strangers I helped and never saw again. The final image stopped me in my tracks. Emily, standing beside the cafe table, tucking a curl behind her ear as I fumbled nervously with the menu. She looked up and met my eyes, exactly like the photo I'd carried. I never forgot that day, I said quietly. She turned to me, eyes shimmering. Neither did I. I watched as the memory dissolved into light. How is this possible, I whispered. Memory is what you are now, she said. It's not just a story you remember. It's your essence, your echo. Every memory that still holds love becomes a path. We walked again through winding corridors of color and light. Each step was weightless. The heaviness of life, regret, shame, grief peeled away in layers. I felt myself growing lighter, not smaller, not fainter, but clearer. At one point, I stopped and asked, "Do you remember your death?" Emily looked at me with a gentle sadness. I remember how it felt, not the pain, but the part where I let go. She looked down at our hands. I waited for you. I knew you'd come. Were you trapped too? She shook her head. No, but love anchors us both ways. You stayed behind to make peace. I waited to help you find it. A glowing bridge appeared ahead of us, arcing over a vast stretch of nothing and everything. Beneath it flowed light and currents, souls perhaps or moments unclaimed. The bridge pulsed softly beneath our feet. Halfway across, I stopped. Can I ask you something? I said. Emily tilted her head. Anything. If this is peace, if this is where I'm meant to be, what happens to the people I leave behind? To Claire? To the ones who helped me? She nodded solemnly. They carry your memory, not your burden. You gave them meaning, not weight. Claire will move on, light. She's stronger than you know. I looked down at the river of memory below. It shimmered with stories never told. Then I asked the question I had buried the deepest. Was I a good person? Emily turned to me and placed a hand over my heart. You were a flawed, frightened, beautiful human. You lived with kindness, you died with love, and you left a mark. What more is there? I felt something inside me, something final and infinite, open like a door. The weight of unknowing dissolved. I saw my life, all of it, as a complete thing, a whole. At the end of the bridge stood a threshold, a doorway made of light and memory. Beyond it was something I couldn't comprehend because it wasn't meant to be comprehended. It was meant to be felt. Emily turned to me. "Are you ready?" I looked back only once. The city was gone. The pain, the confusion, the haunted silence of being invisible to the world, all of it was behind me. What remained was truth. And her. I took her hand again, and together we stepped through the door. There was no sound, no flash, just a single final breath, and then peace.